Hello, everybody. Welcome to our second edition of episode on prioritization with my friend Timo Bethlehem, who you got to know in the first session, a managing director of Meine Markenmode, a famous marketplace northwest of Germany. I'm really happy that with Timo I have the privilege to engage a little bit more often now, more than not. And today we want to dive into more questions on prioritization because Timo, like myself, is a doer, is a planner, and likes to get stuff done. So Timo, I'm really excited to have you here again. Thank you so much for your time. How have you been lately? What have you been working on? And really excited to have you here. Thank you for coming again.
Thanks, man. I've been really good and quite busy over the winter time with setting up the company priorities and plans for the whole year. We have a lot on our plates, so that's really exciting for us to work on some company reorganization, on just get prioritizing and focusing the right things. On private terms, we've been really well over the winter time until 2 weeks ago when the kids started to get sick. So last week was a bit rough. But I think that's really the story of a lot of families and a lot of people right now. It seems like all over Germany and all over the world, a lot of people have gotten sick recently. So keeping my
Yeah,
fingers crossed for everybody to get back to full power and action mode as quickly as possible. Our kids are definitely better. So that's it's really nice to have the weekend now to get all set for the new week.
yeah,
And at the same time, we got some private projects ongoing, planning an annex. So prioritizing is more important for us and for me right now than ever. So.
mm-hmm. That's amazing. Yeah, and as I said, I like talking to you because you are, in my opinion, a doer, and the fact that you just said kids got sick, and I know we were engaging this week on different topics as well. And the fact that you're here today and you could be maybe lying on a couch doing something else says a lot about you. So thank you as well. And in the last episode, we took a broad brush a little bit about prioritization and how we think about values, where we come from. And I really like the values as well a lot because kind of you talked a lot about how where you come from and being hardworking, and kind of sometimes feels odd when you don't work hard on some things, and kind of redefining the self-talk.
Mhm.
And today I want to take a little bit different turn, and a little bit maybe whether that's at work or private life, looking at prioritization and a lot of things that are urgent and non-urgent. Because I like your example because you're a guy who has aspirations. Like you just said, you're building an annex, right? You're managing a company, you have two kids, you have a wife, and obviously you just mentioned before our session, golf practice. So you have a couple of things going on. How do you prioritize what is urgent for yourself and what really matters and what does not? Because I feel it's really nowadays super hard, especially and because there are many conflicting priorities.
I fully agree, especially with the noise getting louder and louder, the outside noise of urgent topics. I fully agree with you. So I love the Eisenhower metrics concept of actually saying, okay, what's important and not important, and what's urgent and not so urgent, and then actually clustering the different topics and tasks on your list, and then actually following through on what is important and urgent, and then saying, okay, what is less important and maybe urgent? How can I delegate that? How can I have somebody else do that and support me, whether it's in the company or whether it's also maybe in private terms? And then on the edge where things are important but maybe not so urgent, okay, how do I make sure that I plan to make time for those topics in the right period of time so they don't become too urgent at a later point in time, where then too many important things are all urgent or overdue at the same time, and then it's really, really impossible to manage things. And I think also here the concept is so simple. We talked about simple concepts and simple ideas last time. Making it happen and actually following through on a daily basis is the hard part with prioritization in general, from my perspective. So for the important topics, I really feel the North Star, the big vision, the big long term, most important thing helps to then also, when it gets more operational, on the annual topics, on the daily tasks, to reevaluate, is this in line with my priorities? Is this really important, or does it just feel important right now because it is urgent? Does it make a difference next year? Do I even remember what I've been doing now? Or is it all forgotten? I mean, there's also interesting ideas and concepts around, okay, if you don't remember what bothers you or what seems to be important right now, in 2 weeks from now, it really is not important. So those ideas can all be helpful.
Yeah, I like how you took a swap at it, because I feel that that's exactly the challenge nowadays, because there's a lot of ideas that come at us,
Mhm.
and especially if you have a team, you obviously work also in an environment which is quite turbulent and maybe seasonal and cyclical. So you have usually obviously some demand in some period of the year, and then the demand in some part of the year maybe less. But then you have obviously seasoned people and players you play with in your company and maybe at home as well obviously, and deciding how to prioritize things. I like the fact that you have some kind of board or vision for yourself, like you said, a North Star, and you say, okay, I mean, it's quite common knowledge, I would say, and sense for people to know, okay, I'm building an annex that's going to happen this time of the year. But then at the same time, like you said, there are some annual priorities, maybe at work, that it's conflicting with that, right? You might have a traveling schedule. And how do you kind of decide what is priority for you? I know this is really depending on the situation scenario, how the company is set up, how the team is functioning, but there's probably some for you. It's still probably most likely aligns to the vision, right? Towards the company, where the company is going, and your private vision, and then you try to match these two together and decide and prioritize.
Yeah, exactly. Those are um, well. Let me start differently. I have an order of priority that I like to
It's
go
what I
back
wanted to
to.
get to exactly. Yeah,
Yeah, that I would like to go back to when things get a little bit tricky. And luckily, you don't. That doesn't always mean you never get to the lower items on that order. It just means, okay, if there's a conflict, if I feel I'm lost or I need to reprioritize, what is my actual priority? Where number one, we talked about this last time, and again, when I say it, it still feels somehow wrong to me. Priority is always myself. It's always me, my personal health, my personal happiness, so that I can give to others, that I can perform, that I can live up to my own expectations and others' expectations. Then number two is my family, and actually it's my partner and my kids are a different priority from my perspective. Um, right now, kids are definitely biggest priority because being 2 and 4 years old, they need a lot of support. Um, but in the long term, I believe my partnership is more important than my kids. Not because I don't love my kids, or it's just okay for the long run, for the long game, for the next. I plan on 82 years more. Hopefully,
that's my man.
81 good years and maybe 1 year of withering away, and, and being really happy together with my great great grandchildren. But um, I think in that regard, my partnership plays an even bigger role than my kids for my overall targets and my overall life. So that is my top three priorities. So work is behind that. Now, that does not mean that I don't take my work seriously and that I don't have big ambitions. And luckily, you don't always have to compromise with work to make the other things happen. Just when things get icky, like last week when the kids were really sick, and they were really sick. We also had to go to the hospital, have them checked out because their breathing was really critical. So, and then work is not a priority, but that does not mean I'm not working. It just means, okay, there are times where I get the most important things done and I prioritize even harder. And then saying no to more things becomes more important. Delegating more becomes more important. So you have less room to work on urgent, important things, and you need to
Yeah.
delegate more. You need to say
Hmm.
more no, and that's where then yeah, that's basically how I do it, in like the concept behind it. That's how I click, how I prioritize, and then looking at it in advance, I try to block time slots for those tasks. So I always like to plan
Mm,
in advance and block out time for my priorities. So that's usually how I find time to work out, to take care of my kids, to work on strategic topics. Because if I plan them first and then plan the urgent stuff for daily ops, for time in between, like reading emails, standard Joe fix team meetings, whatever,
yeah.
and there's always time for the important stuff because you start with a blank calendar, right? Then there's time for everything everywhere. And then you
Mm,
plan the other things afterwards. And that's what I never used to do in the past. In the past, I always would work, okay, this is my work schedule, this is the urgent stuff, this is what's planned out. And now where do I find time for the other things that actually are more important to me?
you reverse engineer.
Yeah, exactly. So, but then there was no time. Then there was a business trip, then there was a business dinner, then there was, okay, I have to get out this concept now because the deadline is due,
Mm,
and then there was no time. But if you reverse engineer it, as you just said, and actually go in advance, and then depending on how big a task you look at, you may need to plan it more than a week ahead, maybe a year ahead, maybe even 5 years ahead,
mm,
and then you have room, sufficient time for the important stuff. Now, does that mean you can just follow through on this plan one to one? I don't think so, because then life happens, right? And then you need to be flexible, and then you need to move things around. But once an important thing is scheduled and you have a certain discipline, my experience is you will not just skip it. You will move it around. You will also need to move it around. Importance, urgency, change. So you
mm.
need to remain flexible, but you will ensure to still make room for the important stuff.
Mm-hmm. I love it. I love your answer. And I think it fully aligns with a lot of people out there, myself included, because I was doing it exactly how you said. Like probably everybody starts. You plan the day, you're like a blank canvas, and then just people jump at you and you just kind of react rather than prevent and say, okay, here, I need to work on this and that has to get delivered. And also, like how you said, I work, I start with me and start with my family because that's obviously when you operate at your best, and sometimes you just cannot get around it, and that doesn't mean that work is not important. It means it has to get done just because the kids, obviously it's critical, mission critical for their health, etc., etc. I like how you put it. I'm curious how you know what is for you the cost of misprioritization, for example, and how do you measure it? Because everybody, you mentioned you have the list, and probably you're like me. I guess you're better, but in my early career I couldn't put a finger on what's important and what's not, right? And I think as you climb through the corporate ladder, you start realizing, okay, well, there is limited time to get this done. So yeah, anyways, I'm curious if you have some strategy for that.
Well, I think
And
a lot of things and a lot of those life critical decisions become a lot clearer in the rear view mirror, right? So
I love that. I love
you
that.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
easy to judge a decision later when you have more information and when you know how things have actually worked out. When you're in the decision, when you're at the time when you need to make a decision, I believe making a decision that feels good and that is in line with your values is much more important than trying to figure out, okay, what's the probability of this and what's the probability of that, because you never know how things will work out. You can pseudo psychologically say afterwards, once things have happened, I knew that in the past, I should have known that, but in reality you can't, right? So I think making that decision and going forward is the most important element. Um, Now, what was your? You need to help me. What was your core question again?
Yeah.
A little
Well,
bit
what is the
sidetracked,
cost?
but
What is the cost of the
yeah,
misprioritization?
thank you.
So yeah, and how you measure it in your
Yeah,
own life.
I really feel when you don't make a decision and when you just go with the flow and you have the outside noise direct your attention and the urgent things happening, I think short term the cost is a lot of stress, because you will just try to make everything happen. Then you will sense whether you subjectively notice or whether you will just sense it. You're not doing the important things. You're not doing things according to your values. So that stresses you even more, I believe, than just pure time pressure. You will be stressed by not getting things done, by um, not living up to your own expectations and your own values. And I believe in the long run, this will end in unhappiness, because you will
Mm,
be
mm,
disconnected from what's really important to you. You will be going into a direction that is decided by others, by outside things just happening to you rather than
mm,
you making things happen. And that will make you unhappy eventually. And I believe when we listen to people, and I think a lot of us have heard this all the time, talking on their deathbeds, it's usually the things that they regret were things that happened to them, where they did not take the steering wheel and decided to do things, but rather did not do something or just went with what happened around them rather than doing what really was important to them. And is it easy to say what's really important? No. But I think you have a good
mm,
gut feeling for your values and for your overall North Star. Now, does that make it easy to evaluate every time? Now, is this more important for my long term happiness than this right now? No, it's hard, but I don't think it matters.
mm, mm,
I really don't think it matters.
mm.
Balancing that the right way, short term, from my perspective, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you power through and work 80 hours one week, and you're because you're on a business trip, you don't see your kids, you're really tired afterwards. Does that matter in the long run? As long as you balance it in the midterm and long run, I don't think it matters. It really doesn't
Mhm,
matter. As long
mm,
as you do it consciously and you still have an idea. Okay, I prioritize this week for a different priority next week. I think there's a lot of flexibility in that. And I think also here people are very different. You have different levels of frustration, of stress that you tolerate, different
yeah,
targets, different
it's a good
ambition.
one.
We talked about energy capacity last time. You're at maybe a little bit different level of your energy capacity. So I think a lot
Yeah.
of those things play a role. But how do you do that? What do you think is the cost of not prioritizing well?
I think for me, generally, it is similar to what you said. For me, it's, I guess, if I prioritize the wrong stuff, I feel like I am not good enough. So for me, that's, when I use your analogy, looking in a rearview mirror, and I'm looking at, okay, I what I did there, that was total crap, and I should have prioritized better. So I tend to beat myself up about it, and I'm like, I should know better. And that's my old kind of self, how I would handle it. But also for me, generally, the cost is just not going towards the North Star, and knowing that if I have, let's put it in perspective, a really heavy week and I don't get to work on some of my side projects, which are really important, maybe my balancing mechanism is, okay, I've had a heavy week, I will spend the whole weekend in front of the TV. And that means I don't get towards the things that are really core to my heart, which is doing the stuff that we do here, helping people maybe with their project, or just being of a service, really. And I feel that sometimes it often, for me, it's the cost is that I'm not aligning, just like you said, the vision and my values towards what really matters to me. And I think it's really funny because it's just from a different angle, but exactly the same what you said with your family, right? You have your family, your work, then relationship with your partner, and it's always kind of mixing and balancing. And for me, it's very similar. I just know that I am at my best when I can help other human beings. And that means also through my work, right? Because that's the majority, the 80,000 hours or whatever during our lifetime. But
Right.
also as a, happy human being, like you said. If the happiness is not really dedicated through action and through something that I'm really passionate about, I just see that I'm just withering away, and that's for me the cost of not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So it's a little bit the bigger picture, and then obviously it comes down to what you said, the blocking the time and working on the things and scheduling these type of things that are important to me. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, yeah. It's I think it's a very interesting for everybody because everybody has a different take on this. Some people like us most likely are doers, and sometimes the cost of it is that you forget the big picture. At least that's what I see as well. That
Yeah.
you're so much into the weeds, so much into the operational stuff, which I tend to really quickly get into. And then I need to remind myself, why am I doing things? What is the bigger picture, so that I'm not running towards east when the sun is in the west, if it makes sense. And
Yeah.
that's where I think stepping outside this whole grind and hustle goals and wake up at the same time, having the same routines and rinse and repeat, it's really good, but it can be really a death trap. At least that's what I've experienced in my life. I don't know how you think about that, but yeah, that's another another option.
Yeah, I think this also goes into the direction that we talked about last time, where discipline and routine and prioritization on a daily basis can get you a long way. But if your direction is not aligned with where you really want to go, whether it's your values, your North Star, your vision of where you see yourself in the future, then you're just going a long way into the wrong direction. And the disconnect between your values, your real idea, and your path will get
Hmm.
stronger and stronger. And I think that ultimately leads to a lot of unhappiness, because no matter how dedicated you are, no matter how hard you're pushing, deep down inside, you feel that you're disconnected to what is actually really important to you.
Hmm.
I think
Hmm.
that's really the difficult one, right? Especially for people that like to push through resistance and that like to work really hard, that you have a fine sense for when is it time to push and when is it time to take a step back and reassess the situation. Am I going into the right direction? And is the resistance that I'm facing right now an internal resistance because I'm not going the right way? Or is the resistance just because it's not an easy way? So you'll always have the bumps in the road, and it's important to go across those bumps. But then sometimes it's just a brick wall where you need to, okay, say, let's not go back and run against it really, really harder, but maybe just go around it and go a different path.
Yeah. Yeah, with that goes also a little bit the question that I had also for both of us is this. I feel like the people I talk to, high performers in general have this notion of saying no, and you mentioned it as well, and I think in the start, I feel that's the hardest part, right? Where to prioritize saying no, where to prioritize saying yes. And I feel you're good at it somehow. At least that's how I mean, I haven't seen you in so many situations, but generally it seems like you really know you have those three North Stars, your work. I know there are way many more than this, but your partner, your kids. But then, if there are other priorities coming, just like now the annex, and you're probably really quickly to say no, hey, sorry, it doesn't align because there is no room. How do you do it, and in at work and in your private life? So did you had to learn it, or were you always like very direct and saying, oh, sorry, this is how it is, and there is no, and this is yes?
No, I think deep down I'm more of a people pleaser. Like I think I was born more a people pleaser,
That's similar to me.
yeah, rather than somebody that was easy in saying no. Mm, and I do believe I have gotten better in this because I had to, because I noticed, okay, it's really tough without saying no. Where I really still have a hard time is saying no to things that I understand are important to other people on a personal level. So it's not so difficult for me to say no to different like projects, different topic driven things,
Hmm.
decisions. But if somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, can I borrow your time, please? I need to talk to you about something that is important," and I usually that's high up on my agenda, like relationship building with people and taking other people seriously. Try, as you said, trying to be of service. Where I think you are way ahead of me in acknowledging that this is super important to you. It's also important. I think it's less of a value for me than for you, but it's also important to me. But then there are situations where, okay, somebody at work needs my attention for a private matter, for a personal matter, then maybe
Hmm.
my kids are sick, and then I don't know, maybe my partner wants something, and so obviously I need to say no to somebody, and that's what is still really, really hard for me. And then I try to squeeze everything in that I sense that I don't meet the expectations that I have of myself for each individual matter, and then it stresses me, and then I start to get angry more easily because I'm stressed
mm,
and frustrated, and that's
mm, mm,
really a vicious circle that I do not want to see happening. So I'd much rather say no and then be very transparent about why. So I
mm.
think a no becomes much easier if you communicate that the no is about you and your values and your decision. And if you're confident in that, then about the other person. So to make it to use an example, somebody wants your time because something is very important. Say, okay, no, I do not want to make time for this now. It's not because your topic is not important. It's not because I don't understand it's important for you. It's because I want to take time for something else right now. So this is my prioritization. Can
Mm.
we find time for this later? Or can somebody else help you? Right. And this is
I like that.
obviously how I would love to react in like a perfect world. I'm very sure I don't always communicate that way. I don't always get it across that way, especially
No.
with kids. I'll just screw off. So, but that's I think ultimately it makes everything a lot easier, and people will usually will understand why you say no. Um,
Mm,
I think you again, you should be very clear, you should be very friendly and transparent about it. Not saying you always need to justify a no, but if you can say no confidently in alignment with your values, and if there is a question around the why, and it's usually about the reason for the no, not so much about the no itself anymore. It's also something that I learned the other day. You can use
mm,
that to your advantage or your disadvantage.
mm.
But the saying no is not an easy topic. But I think most of the times we think it's the consequences are less severe than we are sometimes afraid of, especially if we are people pleasers and we like to be liked
Yeah.
rather than easily saying, I don't give a shit about what anybody thinks about me.
Mm, mm. Yeah. I think I'm probably aligned exactly what you're saying. It's a tough one. I feel getting for me especially maybe even harder. I don't want to compare, but just because I'm open a lot of collaboration with people and for different reasons, and for that being like you said a little bit of a people pleaser and having to work through actually my own prioritization, what is important for me. And I know that's probably one of the area you always said, I admire you, you have so many things going on. Like it's not always so rosy because you need to balance different things and priorities and tell people no because some people want that, and I'm like, yeah, sorry, I'm actually busy in this period with this task. And I really like what you said because for me it's similar, aligning it around bigger vision and giving people actually clear transparent answer that you expect. And I think that's the time we live in the society, that people respond quickly, not always, but expect especially quick response and instant kind of that you're there for them. And at least that's how I usually try to be. Not with everybody, but with people I really care about. I used to do it like that. Now actually I have a set prioritization that I know my phone usually in the evening from somewhere 10 morning or 10 evening till let's say 9 in the morning, I just don't answer. And I have some people who actually wake up early, and I used to wake up in the morning. I used to write people like that, but I'm like, it's about a self-care, and it's about setting some boundaries that you're taking calls maybe at some certain time. It's not that I'm an important Mark Zuckerberg, as we love to pick him as an example, the guy who always works out or who works out, so we should work out. But I think these type of boundaries for ourselves, it makes it easier. But I'm totally with you, it's super hard sometimes because, especially, I don't know how is it for you, but when we are underslept, when we are like more triggered, and when the responsibilities kind of pile up throughout the day, and by the end of the day you're like decision fatigue, you're like, okay. And then it's very easy to say yes to something that you actually wouldn't say no usually because you're tired, you're overwhelmed, maybe there are too many things that you need to do. So yeah, it's a room in progress, but it helps a lot to be, for me, surrounded by people like you, and always borrow these, as I call, hats. What would Timo do? And then I'm like, oh yeah, Eisenhower metrics, less important, more important, and then kind of try to use that and fit it in a life where I need it. So it's quite quite tough, but also not so difficult on the days when you already, like you said, you scheduled and block your calendar. Timo, I'm curious actually if there is some technique you're using, some unique one for prioritization, maybe some counterintuitive one or something that helps you really to decide throughout the day. For me, it's a book that I have behind me. I don't have it next to me, but I can pick it up quickly. It's the decision book with different models in it. Where sometimes when I'm struggling, especially about important decision or sleeping a night over something before I send an email and stuff like that. But do you have something like that for your prioritization that you use?
I think I don't work with any exceptional or very specific techniques. For me, it's really planning in advance.
That's
So
the advanced stuff. Don't need any more stuff like that. You already integrated everything.
I
My man.
would totally disagree. Um, as you know, trying to grow and learning and improving is essential. And we both identified there's loads of room for both of us to grow.
Yeah.
But for me, the
For me more than for you, but it's okay.
let's not get into that. But I feel that my discipline, and when we talked on Thursday and with a different group of people, and
Mm,
Deb mentioned that for her, discipline is just remembering what is really important to yourself.
mhm,
That is something that I'm quite good at in the meantime. So
mm,
when I make a plan, a weekly plan, and then I usually do daily to-do lists that are timed. So I know at a certain point of time, in accordance with the deadline and with my diary, things remind me, okay, you need to work on this now.
mhm,
You need to send this out, or you need to think about this, or you need to make this and this decision.
mm,
Then I'm quite good at following through. So if I have something scheduled in my calendar, I've gotten quite good at, okay, I will do it when the calendar says you should be doing this. So that's usually all I need. So where I was really bad, as I said earlier, that when I planned my week, the important stuff came at the very end, and then I found it hard to squeeze it in. Now I try to
reverse
reverse engineer
engineer.
that, as you
Yeah.
said.
Hmm.
So that's basically all I need, and then still where my hardest development area is at the moment that I really would like to get better at is making the long-term important stuff actually feel good in the moment.
Yeah, we talked about it. Hmm.
Yeah, that's
Mhm,
really
hmm.
my big struggle. So I also last time I talked about, okay, not having a vision board and really using more with priority lists and different topics that I like to prioritize. Now I actually did create a vision board over the holidays, because I hope that constantly envisioning how I would like to see myself in 40 years, 50 years, 60 years
Hmm.
helped me to understand, okay, I'm doing something now that is not urgent, and that it feels like I'm wasting time. I'm not working on other more important things that are
Hmm.
really not more important. They're just more urgent and more
Hmm.
present right now. That it actually feels good to do stuff that is the important stuff, especially that is not work. Like what I said, I'm working on the important stuff. That can be being on the playground with my kids, right? It's not
Hmm.
work, but it is for me. It is an investment into where I want to see myself and how I want to see myself in 50 years from now. So
Mhm.
that is really the hard part for me, is not so much identifying the important things. I invested quite a bit of time in that. Whether that always will hold true in the next 50 years, I don't know. But for now, it gives me a good feeling. And
Hmm.
then operationalizing that into the next year or maybe the next week, I've also gotten a lot better. So that's also okay. But then making it feel good all the time, that's really where I want to get better, because it sometimes it feels odd to think, okay, I'm doing everything the right way as I understood I want to do it, and as how I feel this should be making me happy. But then it still stresses me when I don't work on the urgent stuff, and it feels like I let it slide. But how is that for yourself? Because I know with all your ambitions and the difficulty of saying no, I also assume it's quite hard to always feel great about prioritizing.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, what helps me a lot is, like you mentioned, having some type of tool where I see my goals every day. And I used to have a physical planner that I bought in pre-COVID, where you have certain questions to ask yourself: how is your morning, how is your evening, and in between kind of fill it out. And I used to do that for 5 years, and that helped me a lot. And you evaluate actually your week, your month, and then have these collections. But it was very tedious, and I very quickly, like you said, it just felt like so boring at some point. This whole, I know why I'm doing it, but in between this whole tedious work, and that's where I started asking myself, does it actually always have to feel great? That's the, like, it probably doesn't, but it maybe I'm doing it in a just from a wrong perspective, or just the whole process of, okay, I have to do it. And sometimes what I found out is just taking a break and trying a different system helped me, and then coming back to it later. But generally, what helped me a lot, and what helps me even now, is having some type of tool where you just visualize your goal. Like for you, be the best granddad, right? For me, I had be, live, I just said it last time, around the stairs when I'm 100, be a humanitarian like Keanu Reeves or something like that. And for me, seeing that every day, it reminds me in all of my interactions who I want to be and what are my values, that I want to be kind, that I want to be humble, that I want to be generous. And having these goals, and I had actually, goals for 10 years, goals for 5 years, goals for kind of 1 year. And I always went through it. It was a little bit overwhelming. After a while, I'm like, I'm actually, and that's where it started to feel bad, because I'm like, am I actually even moving to this? It's just I having it on the board. But having it now, and now I switch because somehow they changed the tool, and then they just removed all the stuff I put there for a year or more. I'm like, oh, now everything is gone. And I'm like, oh man. And now so I memorize it so much. And that's how to answer your question, it helps me a lot in these moments when I feel not like doing it. It's just that I remind myself, stay grounded, or just look at a vision board. I know that even just the feeling of looking at it for 1 second, it just brings the emotion. So for me, it's that part, but also just learning, like I said, working with that feeling that I don't feel like it, and it doesn't feel right, and accepting that. And that helped me a lot. And that's maybe through the Stoics I was mentioning last time, just a little bit like accepting, not always fighting the emotions that come. And because I have it probably like you, we are all humans, I just don't feel great all the time. And in my past, I thought I should always feel positive, I should always feel optimistic. But I'm like, I mean, is that actually right? Because humans, we experience all the roller coaster, and just finding and accepting it. And when I started fighting it and kind of letting it, and there is a great book from Tara Brach, it's called Dropping Ashes on a Buddha, I think,
Mhm.
something like that. It was amazing, eye-opening for me, because it really, it's quite deep. And I got bored halfway through because I'm like, you pragmatic with this guy. But it helped me to understand that it is process, and then just don't always have to feel great. But so I don't think, I just, long story short, I don't think there is some magical answer out there. I think it changes through what you focus on and how you evolve yourself. But just having fun, that's for me now. I redefine everything. I'm like, I'm having fun whatever I'm doing, and trying to find fun in what I'm doing, if it makes sense.
I totally love that. Especially that you go more to this generalist concept, which is kind of the way that I also went. So for business, I feel operational, trackable targets, numbers are
Yeah,
super important to
yeah,
have also an alignment in the team. Where do we want to go to measure success? To also have a specific aligned ambition. So I think that is super important.
yeah.
For me personally, having very specific targets for in a year or in 5 years, as in, okay, I want to have read this many books, I want to have made this much money, or I want to have this and that title, or I want to have this and that many kids, whatever, right? I I felt it felt unnatural to me. And I know you can't measure what you don't plan, and I know you can do crazy things if you set specific targets and if you have specific things in mind. If you want to reach certain progress, I just feel what's the point a little bit, right? Like,
Yeah, it's far ahead, and that's the challenge, I think, as well. Maybe.
well, even if it's far ahead, for me, it's not so much the far ahead. I think there's a lot of proven statistics and research that this really can be very motivating, and you can reach a lot of targets that you set very, very high and very ambitious.
Yeah,
For
yeah.
me, it's more that, but then what? Right? Okay, then you got that
Mm,
title, then you got the money, then you got the car,
mm,
then you got the
mm,
family.
mm, mm, mm,
Okay, but for me, it's more the, like, ultimately what's important for me, what are my values, and then living to those values will take me the right way. How
right.
fast I go,
Doesn't matter.
how high I fly, does it really make a difference? Maybe I
Yeah.
don't know. More probably, this is this is from a very privileged perspective, from somebody that has a family, that is very happy with the status quo, that has a job he likes, that has some financial security. So I think I'm
Mm,
quite aware that this is a very privileged perspective, especially when you're happy with where you are. But again, I think you can reach great heights if you set ambitious targets. But why do you want to climb so high? Like, does it make you happy, really? And for me, I think I realize more and more the older I get, that this is not what makes me happy, and this is not what I
mm,
should be prioritizing for.
mhm. I think it's totally justified, and you and me, I think we are very similar in this. I come obviously from, as I mentioned on the last episode, from Eastern Europe, and maybe that's the hunger in me because I see a lot of opportunities, and it's not because of the monetary side of things, which I feel for me as well is part of the responsibility that I have for some of my parts, family members, where at least like maybe my mom and for that's why I aspire and have these bigger goals. But I totally align with you because I feel for me it's really probably, and it's the more important part, like for you, serving my family really well and being at service there. And then if you can amplify that outside, and that's at least for me comes with reach and not necessarily being celebrity etc, but just
Mm.
doing something that fulfills you. And I think if we both are really honest to ourselves at the end of our lives, it's not going to be like you said, the 80-hour work weeks, the cars, the titles, the houses. It's not about that. It's about where we actually really happy, like you said, with what we done on a day-to-day basis, whether that's being integrous with our values to our family and prioritize well, because yes, we will make our companies great and we will make our teams amazing, and that's obviously big satisfaction that we both have, I think, from our jobs. But just what you know everybody has to answer themselves, but for me it's really just doing some good in the world, and I think the world needs it, and everybody has a different kind of definition about that. Yeah. So
Uh,
Timo, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no, no, that's fantastic. I think I also thought about, like, the general values and general proposition. I believe if you want to change something very particular,
Mm,
then maybe it's more valuable to measure against something specific,
yeah, yeah,
right?
absolutely.
But then again, what you should measure? Should it be the effort that you invest that you should measure,
Or
or
the
the
outcome.
outcome, right?
Good
Like,
one.
looking at health, for example, should you have a target around how many workouts you should be doing per week,
Yes.
or should you have a target about how many kilos of muscle you want to gain, right?
Both. I think one leads to another, but you're absolutely right. I mean, it's
That's the
you
point for me,
simplify
though.
it because
One,
one
sorry.
leads to another, right? You do the muscle, and automatically you and me will think exactly the same way. You need to do certain amount of workouts to get there.
Yeah, but I agree. But for me, in the past, I always used to measure the outcome, and I think for if you want to
Uh,
reach a specific target, and for a company again, If you're performance focused, you have to measure the output.
Mm.
If you are in a good place and you want to improve and you play the long game, for me, it's gotten more important to measure the effort, right? So
Yeah.
I've
My
decided
man.
1.5 years ago, I will work out every day. Every day I will do some kind of workout because I know small things add up over time and they will lead me the right way. Yes, I
Mm.
know I should be doing more resistance training. Yes, I know a lot of my exercises are not hard enough to make the progress that could be possible. But I quite frankly, I don't care right now. My priority is do a workout every day. It's made me fitter. Have I gained, I don't know, 4 kilos of muscle mass or 3 kilos of muscle mass? Has
Mm.
my VO2 max increased by 5 points or 3 points? I don't know. It doesn't matter. Like the trend goes in the right direction. I know I do something that helps my health that will get me in the right direction in the long run. I know what kind of effort I should invest, and then I know I will be doing this for 80 years. I don't care if by the end of the year I have gained 3 kilos of muscle mass or four, or whether I lost one
Yeah.
kilo of body
Yeah.
weight or two.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's for me also the big difference for the long game, for setting priorities. Yes, for your effort and for your routines. I am convinced you should set priorities of and also targets of how much you want to invest, and how much you want to how much you want to invest. For business, again, it's quite the opposite because if your target is to gain maximum performance, I think you need an output target that is really measurable, that is really important. But for me, again, for my biggest priorities, my partnership, my kids, my health,
Mm.
and
Mm.
overall my job, like my professional um, evolution, like what can I do with
Mm.
my
Mm.
work time?
Mm.
It's not about a specific target. It's about being in line with my North Star and going to the right direction.
Mm.
Not
Mm.
about the speed, how fast I get there, and how high I go.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I agree. I think it's. I had this discussion with my dad about fitness because I see it with my brother. Right, he's competing in cycling. He's getting quite good at it, and then he was like, yeah, because he was always challenging me because he knew I was competing in the man physique before in the past years, and he's like, yeah, how many pull-ups can you do? And then we were like and then I told him once, I kind of look at my dad and I'm like, hey, let's see in 20 years if you still will be doing it, because I can tell you I'm doing this for 20 years now. Will you be doing it in 20 years? And my dad, I could see like the look at his face, and he said exactly. And that's exactly to your point. Like speed, agility doesn't matter. And that's what I realized with age, that it's, I want to be doing it running the stairs when I'm 100. That means I need, if I gonna go all out now only on output, I would most likely not get there. Just because you need to kind of pace yourself and you need to think differently. But playing the long game, I really, yeah. It's also just says you have to obviously differentiate between your private life and work, just like you said, but it's about the effort and kind of embracing the process as well. Because if people don't perform at work and you immediately disregard them just because they had a bad year, I mean, where are we? And that happens a lot, right? We see that daily in different companies, but they have maybe qualities because they lift people up, they are there, they just show up, you see that, but they just had a bad year. It's just because maybe the industry is bad. So I totally love how you said it. Amazing.
Thanks, man.
So Timo, to round this off, I wonder, is there one thing, one priority, which is always so hard for me to say, that you work on this year? Something that really is close to your heart. It can be business, it can be private. Something that you would say, okay, I'm dedicating, that time to this year, and I wanna accomplish that.
For me, it's definitely my partnership. In the last few years, and I see this with people all around me that are in a similar age, that are in a similar period of their life, where maybe they had young kids, maybe they were very ambitious with work, maybe they've had a relationship for a long period of time with the same person. that they are changing, they are evolving, and it's easy to lose your partner behind. Because you focus on different things. And as I said, in my ideal world, and I've been with my partner for 20 years now, which is awesome. We've obviously
I have to
gone
clap
through a lot of
out
things.
loud that people hear it.
Thanks, man. But she probably deserves a clap more than I do. But anyways, um,
Very
the
sweet.
um, especially with small kids, they take a lot of your attention. We both work full time. We really love our work. We also prioritize our health, so we have our own hobbies. But usually, what did not receive enough time and energy from my side in the last few years was really our partnership. And that doesn't necessarily only mean taking a date night off from the family, spending time alone. This is also important to me, and we've not done enough of this. But it's also just a hug here and there, right? Just showing affection and that you care about the other person, because the stressful moments and the telling each other what you don't like about the other person will come automatically, right? In a full day where it's hard to meet all the expectations all the time. So that is really my top priority this year, and I see that it's difficult to make it happen all the time, but it really is important to me.
Mm, amazing. I think it's also the, I don't know, right priority in terms of, you could say, agree or disagree, but for, people who listen or watch this, like, I've believed that behind every, strong man, there is a good partner. I realized it through the relationships I had, and I'm like you a little bit now this year, not as long, 8 years, but getting married and, prioritizing that. So also obviously thinking about kids and that stuff. That's why I'll constantly bring it up with you and trying to see how you cope, because I definitely have a lot of respect, and I guess that's the right word. Changing my life and a lot of the things that we build with Katie and traveling and just having this broad focus that I had on things that I love. So for me, it's really that. Also, pretty much just figuring out how that fits. I'm not so worried about the relationship now because we are really good partners, but obviously being longer together, having kids as well. So for me, it's now more trimming the garden and looking at which projects I have to actually cut out and really focus on what matters. Yeah, and that's the hard part for me.
Okay, so that's your top priority this year to.
Yeah, cutting out the projects and just focus on less, because as you know, I mean, from the past, I had a lot of priorities. There was a company that I wanted to build and try to build next to my full-time job, and it went quite well, but it just like drained me, right? And there is less. I was just became a workaholic, and that I didn't like the person I was. I loved the fact that I did that because I learned a lot, managing a lot of people and just doing things and being, strategizing and thinking, how can you make the world a better place? But then you realize, to your point, life is short, but yet long enough to really think about where you want to make an impact. And that sometimes doesn't mean that you need to have 3 or 5 projects and see which one pans out. You just sometimes double down on one, and if it doesn't turn out after 3 years that you like that, then you abandon that, and that doesn't mean you're a failure. You can switch to something else. So for me as well, it's just refining that and really kind of stripping away the noise. And that's why I love these conversations like we had today, because it reminds me again that what really matters, it's always, and I like the conversation between us because it always brings it back to values, family, and really kind of blocking that time in your calendar from that first, and then it gets there, then you block the urgent stuff, and when you're at your best, then everything else kind of aligns.
Yeah,
So
that makes perfect sense to me, because as we discussed before, if you actually have quite a bit of skills, and if you also worked on learning a lot of mitigating your weaknesses, and
yeah.
you actually are able to do a lot of things, and you could be doing all these different topics, then it's much harder also to prioritize where you really your talents and your strengths are, and what where can you really excel, what is also fulfilling you, what is fun in the long run, right? And not only hard work, right? Because you can.
Mm,
And
mm,
I think this is something that is much more difficult for a person like you to prioritize, that could be doing so many different things, and then really listening to yourself. What is it that you want to do,
yeah,
and why?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I hear you. I can feel that, and it's so interesting how you are just really in a little bit different phase of your life right now, that totally relates to me probably about 8 years ago,
Mm,
before I changed my job and decided to follow a different path. So I remember how hard that was, and again now looking in the rearview mirror, how easy it was.
exactly.
But now you know how it
Yeah,
worked out,
yeah.
right? Not
Mm,
because the last 8 years were all fun and games and it was all roses,
mm,
not at
mm,
all. But because it feels like it was the right decision in the right direction. But I definitely very clearly remember how hard it was at the time,
mm,
to say no to some things that I really liked.
mm. Yeah, and I think now, and that's why I seek out, people like you who think maybe or have different point of view or experience in that, and I feel it's indeed less scary than ask me 8 years ago. I would be like, oh man, no, I got to do 5, 10 things. Come on, like I got to spread myself thin. But now I'm like, yeah, if I have kids, I mean, things will change anyway, and it doesn't. If I have time, and that's what I also remind myself. As short as life is, I have this reminder like you on the phone, which just pops up and says, "Hey, dude, you got time, chill." Really, literally, I had to put it in my phone, and that
Awesome.
pressure just goes off. I'm like, it's okay, I don't have to do this, but it's hard. You're right, and that's why. If you don't mind, I will come to you occasionally, and thank you for your gift as well. Generous gift with the strength test. That was really interesting and reminder for me to see where my strength lies, and a little bit this notion of you said working on your weaknesses and kind of thinking like, oh yeah, you got to work on that, where there are different obviously opinions on this, but it's just nice to have such valuable people like yourself to remind you, hey, you got this, man. It's fine, you don't missing out on anything, just focus on where your passion lies, and otherwise you pick up something else. So word.
Right.
Timo, any final concluding thoughts? We went a little bit on a ramble. I really loved spending time with you, and I have to say I'm looking forward to see you again face to face, my man. You always bring joy in my life every time we engage, and that's why I try to squeeze more of your time in my life this year. I apologize for that in advance, but I'm really every time humbled. You bring such a refreshing perspective and ideas, and it's really really lovely. So anything you wanna give our listeners and people who will watch this before they go to sleep or eat or take care of the kids or relax on a couch, and you deserve it, my man.
I think again we touched on a lot of things. I would like to thank you for your curiosity and your positivity. It's always an inspiration, and I think you inspire a lot of people. So that's why I love also spending time with you. It's great to see your positivity and curiosity. So thank you for that, and definitely make sure to continue building on that, because you definitely reach a lot of people.
Thank you, my man. And guys, please check out Timo on LinkedIn. Connect with him if Timo obviously allows you to connect with him, because he might say also no, don't no time for talk. But I really think it's worth to meet Timo if you can. If you live somewhere in the northern West Germany, then definitely. And otherwise, reach out to Timo on LinkedIn. And until the next time, Timo, stay awesome, and thank you again, my man.
Thanks,
Speak
Matteo.
soon. Take care. Bye bye, guys.